When you think about Korean food, what comes to mind? Probably that bubbling, savory jjigae stew, right? Or the amazing, complex tang of kimchi. These are flavors that are loved all over the world now, and they feel so, well, so Korean, like they've just always been there. But what if I told you that the secret behind all of it, the stews, the fermented foods, the very foundation of the cuisine we know today, all comes from one single, incredibly ancient invention? What on earth could that be? This, a simple, primitive earthenware pot. I know, it doesn't look like much, does it? But this little piece of technology wasn't just a container. Oh no, it was a full-on revolution that would literally change the course of human history in Northeast Asia. To really get why this pot is such a big deal, we need to stop thinking of it as just, ancient dishware. We need to see it for what it truly was. Humanity's very first bioreactor. Basically, a piece of tech designed to grow and sustain a biological process. Now, the food scientist Cheryl Ho Lee, whose research is the basis for this whole explainer, he put it perfectly. He said, through the eyes of a food scientist, mankind's first bioreactor can be seen in earthenware. That one idea just completely reframes how we look at this ancient object, doesn't it? And when we say ancient, we mean ancient. Just look at this timeline. Pottery shows up in Northeast Asia tens of thousands of years ago, way, way earlier than in other places you might think of, like Mesopotamia. The oldest we found is in China, but you also see incredibly old sites pop up in Russia and Japan. And by 10,000 years ago, it's definitely established in Korea, like at the Gosan-ri site. And what's really fascinating is just how many of these early sites there were. This map shows a huge cluster of Neolithic pottery remains right around the Korea Strait. So this area wasn't just, copying a new trend. It was a real hotbed of innovation for this brand new technology. And these folks weren't just making one-size-fits-all pots. They were sophisticated engineers. They developed specialized tools for very specific jobs. A small cooking pot, the tteokbokki, a medium-sized hangari that was perfect for fermentation, and a large dok for storing dry goods. Each one was designed with a very specific purpose in mind. So this specialization unlocked two world-changing food technologies. Let's talk about the first one, a fundamental shift away from a roasting culture to a brand new boiling culture. See, before the pot, your main way of cooking was roasting stuff over an open fire. Simple enough. But with a waterproof, fireproof container, you could now cook with water. This was a total game changer. All of a sudden, tough plants, grains, and seafood, things that used to be inedible or even unsafe, became digestible and packed with nutrition. It just massively expanded the menu for all of humanity. So here's the crucial point. The source material argues that this created a great divide in human civilization. On one side, you have the roasting culture, often nomadic, focused on animals, really common in the West. And on the other, you have the boiling culture, which made a more settled, plant-based lifestyle possible, especially in the East. And this diagram just illustrates that divergence so brilliantly. The simple invention of the pot sets humanity on two totally different culinary and cultural paths, starting way back in the Neolithic age. It's like a fork in the road of history, and it's all because of a humble clay pot. And believe me, that path leads directly to today. You know that Korean stew, jjigae, that's often cooked and served bubbling hot in its own little earthenware pot? Well, that's not some modern fad. It is a direct culinary descendant of this 10,000-year-old boiling revolution. Amazing, right? But boiling was only the first major breakthrough. The pot also turned into a kind of accidental laboratory, which led to the discovery of a whole new science: fermentation. Think about it. Once you start boiling food, especially things that go bad quickly like seafood, you're going to have leftovers. So what do? You store them in these new pots. And that led to a completely unintentional but absolutely world-changing discovery. Let's just imagine how this could have happened. You're a Neolithic forager. You gather some vegetables, put them in a pot, and cover them with seawater, which happens to have about 3% salt. Almost right away, naturally present bacteria, leuconostoc, kick off lactic acid fermentation. This drops the pH, which preserves the veggies and creates these totally new, complex flavors. And just like that, you've basically invented the ancestor of kimchi. And hey, it works for seafood too. If you put fish or shellfish in a pot and mix them with that acidic fermented veggie mash or maybe even some acidic fruit, the low pH keeps it from spoiling. At the same time, the fish's own gut enzymes start breaking down the proteins, creating these incredible savory umami flavors. You've just invented joltgeil, or fermented seafood. And get this, it even works for alcohol. Let's say you store some grains or starchy roots in a pot in a humid spot. A mold starts to grow, and it breaks down the starch into sugar. Then, wild yeast just floating around in the air finds that sugar and ferments it into alcohol. Without knowing any of the science, you've just brewed the first makgeolli, or rice wine. But these weren't just happy accidents. People were actively improving the technology. This table shows pottery found in Korea, and you can see a clear progression. Over thousands of years, they learned to bake the pots at higher and higher temperatures. And crucially, they started adding clamshell powder. The calcium in the shells would basically melt and fill in the pores, making the pots stronger and a lot less absorbent. They were literally engineering the perfect bioreactor. Okay, so we have these two massive leaps in food tech: boiling and fermentation. But the impact didn't just stop at the dinner table. This technology would go on to build the very foundations of society itself. The ripple effect was just enormous. Cooked food meant better nutrition and hygiene. Fermentation meant you had a stable food supply all year round. And that combination meant people could settle down and live in one place long before anyone invented agriculture. Think about that. That stability is what leads directly to population growth and the development of more complex societies. And this map just makes that connection stunningly clear. The yellow area, that's the primitive pottery zone from 7000 BCE. It's where this whole technological revolution took root. Flash forward thousands of years, and that exact same area becomes the heartland of Gojoseon, the very first Korean state. The foundation for the nation was laid in these simple clay pots. When you boil it all down, it comes back to this one thing. This single invention provided the nutritional and social stability that a civilization needs to even begin to emerge. As the source material concludes, the primitive pottery culture era is considered an important starting point that determined the food culture of Koreans. It didn't just change what they ate, it fundamentally shaped who they would become as a people. So, a simple pot really did change the world. It altered the trajectory of a people and helped build a nation. And it just makes you wonder, what simple, maybe even revolutionary piece of technology are we completely underestimating today?